Started, I emailed you the link to the presentation. You won't necessarily need to access it until the end for the exit slip because we have some paper copies. Don't tell Mr. Reuter if you see him, but there are some paper copies on your table. There's Mr. Huber. Today, after coming off of mid-year meetings, we know that we have a lot of data and we're very good at collecting our data. Today's meeting is intended to take it to that next step, the so what. So we have spreadsheets worth of data. What are we doing with it? So our goal is that everybody can walk away with at least one strategy that they can apply. It'd be great if you could apply it with your entire class, but we'd really like you to think through your subgroup lens today. Those 6 to 8 kids that you might need to think through and try to leave with a strategy for those kids and something that you can apply. We know that when we look at feedback in 3D, that using the assessment in instruction, that often that comes through our communication, which is 3A. So what we say to kids, what we do, and how 3D and 3A are connected. So you'll hear a lot about that today from what words we use with kids, what strategy we may use. Keep in mind the SLO rubric, which we talked about at a lot of subgroup mid-year meetings, that level 4 descriptor really looks at how you are adjusting instruction based on the data you've collected. So again, our goal is that you can leave here with at least one strategy to implement, and not necessarily a delivery, not that it's a small group or you're conferring, but really what you do, what action you have with those kids. In order to help the flow, here's a nice little timeline that we're going to start by looking at an assessment or a work sample, and that's what you'll find in the middle of your tables for everybody. Is there's going to be 4 different ones that will work together going through. A teacher, we have 4 different teachers who are going to help guide us through this. So they're going to start by, Taylor's actually the first one. She'll show you the work sample. She's then going to give you 2 to 3 minutes to talk with your vertical teams about what strategy would you do? What's your next step if this was your student? And we have an example from language arts. We have a science example, a math example, and a Spanish example. So we know it might not be your content, but thinking outside of that, what step would you do? What strategy would you use with those kids? Then the teacher, whoever's example it is going to talk through what they saw from the example. Next, what they did, what strategy they used. And lastly, they're going to show you how they collect their data, how they track what they're doing with kids, how they track, how they adjust that instruction. So that's just another seed to plant for you of how you're collecting your data. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor, who is our first one. Oh, one other thing, I'm sorry. Adam and I are just going to join vertical teams your groupings for each one will pop around for each of the 4. So that brings us to the end, and connecting it to the beginning where we really wanted you to walk away with at least one strategy to be able to use with your subgroup students. Hopefully you were able to grab a little golden nugget from also the data collection, something that you could add, something maybe where you're documenting where you identify the misconception or those next steps. But really at the end of the day, there's that exit ticket that we're looking for, really those strategies. Before we go into the exit ticket, though, there's 2 things. First, I do want to thank Taylor, Sarah, Jen, and Michelle for helping us out today. I thought they did a fantastic job.
So interesting setup. You had groups of about 6 to 8 teachers, all 35 teachers, I think. And was it mostly content teachers in that group, or it
was the entire staff that teaches 7th, 8th, or Encore. So it's the 4 core subjects, and then we have PE teachers, world language, tech ed, music, art, family consumer science. So anybody who teaches students for those 7 periods of the day.
Great. Now talk a little bit about kind of the overall goal for that session and how you came to the approach you did with the teacher leaders and the teacher sitting in the grouping. Because they all had grouping when they came in. There was names listed on the PowerPoint.
So one one meeting a month in the morning is when we have what we call the vertical team meetings, and those are their vertical teams that we set at the beginning of the year. And it's not vertical teams meaning content alike, but it's really a mixture of 7th, 8th, and Encore. So at any given table you have a math teacher, a literacy teacher, social studies, maybe orchestra, art, that it's really different grade levels, different perspectives to bring, and different experiences and strengths.
Right.
So they meet with that team one morning a month, where we ask them really just to have a cross-content discussion about something that we've posed to them. We don't always sit in those teams during staff meetings, but I chose to do that this time because being a person who gets to go into all of their classrooms and see all of the great things they're doing, they don't get to do that very often. They don't get to hear what other people are doing, and it could be social studies learning from tech ed. Instructional strategies are instructional strategies at the end of the day, and we can learn from that. We just had our mid-year meetings, and a lot of that came up where a teacher would be reflecting or thinking about their next step, all while I'm thinking about the meeting I had the day before where that teacher's already doing that next step and doing it really well. But that teacher before needed to learn from somebody else. I can connect all those dots. And so my hope was to try to connect some of that for them in this short 40-minute meeting. So part of that reason to sit together is to really learn from each other. The other thing is to get to know each other and have that climate and culture continue to evolve, where it is a building where 7th and 8th and Encore are very divided because of the schedule. We have a teacher here who's a 7th grade teacher that has an 8th grade student. They never even see each other. So within the building, they don't get to see people, and we have a handful of new staff members that if they don't have these opportunities to meet each other and talk with one another, they're not going to.
Right.
So it was twofold there, the reasoning behind it.
And then if you can talk just a little bit about the content or focus, and then how you selected the teachers to kind of facilitate the examples.
So our focus this year as a district has been universal tier 1 instruction. But knowing that we anchor on Danielson for that instruction, we've been trying to get to know Danielson even better than we do already. We were a pilot school. Our teachers know the framework, but they don't still make those connections on their own necessarily.
Right.
So we try to help them make those connections. Our first staff meeting really started in the domain 1, the planning, and we broke down looking at components 1A and 1B. From there we moved to component 1C and looking at the learning outcomes that we set for kids. From there we moved from how does the outcomes we set for kids come alive through our communication with kids in 3A. So that was the last time that we met as a staff, was really connecting our outcomes and how we communicate that with our students. So coming off of mid-year meetings and their SLOs and analyzing what they need, as well as where we want to go with understanding Danielson, we reflected and looked at that SLO mid-year meeting and saw so much data. But what are we doing with that data? How are we reteaching? We found that a lot of our teachers are pulling small groups or pulling one-on-one, but just saying it again the same way, not necessarily changing up their strategy or implementing something different.
When you said, sorry to interrupt, when you said we were looking at the data, was that with you, the leadership team, or was that the teacher teams?
Combination.
Okay.
So I did a lot of reflecting by myself, but then also Adam, that head principal, and I talk about it. And then also Chris Reuter, who's the K-8 teaching and learning, comes over and helps guide us through that. He is very good at asking questions, never really telling us what we should do. Hopefully, like we are working with our teachers and teachers are working with the kids. Really asking the questions and probing and guiding us to come up with those things. The other thing was that we meet with our leadership team, which is our system specialists. Those are literacy specialists, technology specialists, math specialists, as well as our teacher leaders within the building. We have a liaison, we call it, one per department at the building, and we meet with them monthly. This really came more from the meetings between myself, Adam, and Chris, trying to figure out that next step for the building. One of my goals is to really increase the leadership within the building. So the 4 teachers you saw are not on our leadership team. So they are different leaders trying to leverage everybody at a different time. Those 4 all, through mid-year meetings, spoke about students. They're very student-centered. I know that they keep the data, and I know that they speak to the strategies. So I went to teachers that I knew were going to fit the need for this meeting, which was to try to drive the strategies, arm teachers with a strategy to walk away with in order to implement with their kids.
Right.
That data collection and the SLO rubric, where you need to really document the adjusting instruction portion of it, really to keep track over time. I tried this with Johnny today, it didn't work. I'm going to try this with Johnny, and it did work.
Right.
Being able to analyze that over time versus just a bunch of numbers. That these 4 teachers were doing that and taking that to the next step.
Yeah.
So the first teacher that you saw there, I knew was going to be very comfortable presenting. 2, I thought were going to turn me down. Absolutely thought they were going to turn me down, and one of them flat out told me, I know I don't want to do this. And I said, I know you don't. So they were strategically chosen because they have the expertise, they have the knowledge, but they also need those leadership options and opportunities to share their expertise. It also it reinforces them of the good work that they're doing.
And then talk a little bit about your role in it. You were kind of introduced it. I saw
Yep.
you greeting teachers as they came in and explaining what, where they're going to be. And then you went to different tables. So just maybe talk a little bit about that and your participation and
Sure.
what you learned by being a kind of a active participant.
I'm not going to know the conversations unless I'm at those tables. So Adam and I plan to go around from tables, never being at the same table, in order to hear what the teachers were saying and what they were grounding themselves in. Was it skill and strategy? Was it content? Was it just repeating the same teaching point? And I took some mental notes because I didn't want to do it, that's deflate, right in front of them. Most conversations were really anchored in the strategies. I'm glad I gave this because this helped people be able to look through and have a strategy to go to if they had nothing else to say. I thought it was interesting. Some people spoke up who I'm glad they did, but that aren't usually those who talk within their group. Others I took note of, well, they're just repeating exactly what was already said, the same strategy. So they still have not moved away from something else I can do. That student didn't learn it this way the first time.
Right.
I want to move to something else. So tomorrow Adam and I will talk and kind of debrief about what he heard, what he saw, trends and patterns, in order to identify where we need to go next. The other thing is that exit ticket will be able to help us whether or not they did meet the learning outcome, if they found something that they're able to take back and use with kids.